Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Bella Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. Hi there. This is Bella Rose, and I am so grateful that you are joining us. So today's episode, we have got some really good practical ideas on how to deal with compassion fatigue. So if this is a new concept for you, if maybe you've been a Jesus follower for a long time, or you're an actual ministry leader, or maybe you're new to the Christian life and you're like, go, 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 go. Let's do all these things for Jesus. The Bible is full of really good things for us to accomplish, and that's awesome. And so the thing that I think sometimes happens with pastors specifically and ministry leaders specifically is they have such a full life of serving and loving, and they don't necessarily realize how to create a lifestyle outside of ministry that will support the work and the calling God has placed on their life and the things He wants them to do. They don't have a lifestyle that supports it for a long-term, sustainable serving. And they get burnt out and they get compassion fatigue. And Kevin Bueltmann is actually coming on the podcast today specifically to talk about this issue. And he has specific advice for you and me, maybe somebody who's not a pastor themselves, but also specifically for pastors. And he has specific therapeutic resources that I'm excited to bring you, because there's no question that our church needs leaders that are going to walk in integrity. They're going to be able to be in the quiet, in the private. They look the same in the public. And if you've been around, you know that that's not always the case, and it harms the body of Christ. And so I really want this episode and this concept to go far and wide. And if you need to align your private life with what your followers or your flock needs you to be, and you don't have a safe place to do that, well, here's a resource. A place that works. Kevin's gone through it himself. And actually, he went on this retreat. He'll talk about it, but he went on this retreat. And then he also did a program with Delight Your Marriage, the men's program, to transform his marriage. And then his marriage became healthy enough and wonderful enough, and it was good. He'll tell you. But that now they work together on this retreat center, serving so many other pastors in the very same situation that he was in just several years before. So it's just, glory to God, amazing that his journey has led here. But I'm really excited to share this with you. I hope you'll listen in. Amazing. Hi, Kevin. It is so good to see you again, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So I have the distinct pleasure and honor to introduce Kevin Bueltmann to you, my listener, because Kevin, I have known for some years. I think that's an S.
Probably 3 years, probably.
3 years?
Almost 3 years, probably. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so Pastor Kevin, I'm going to let you officially introduce yourself, but we have a journey together because he and I, he came to Delight Your Marriage at one point, right. And then his journey moved into actually working with me in Delight Your Marriage, which was amazing. And then his journey continued, and now he's doing some amazing work with a specific ministry that he's going to be telling us more about. But in talking with him just a couple of weeks ago, before he went on some amazing travel around the country, telling more pastors about this work, but was really to see how we can serve the audience of Delight Your Marriage listeners to, because we have so many ministry leaders, we have so many pastors, we have so many people in our community that need to not get burnt out, that need to not get to a space of where their heart is to serve, but their lifestyle and the way they approach their serving ends up getting to a place where they can harm people and harm themselves and not be a long-term situation. And that's not what we want. So I'm excited that Kevin's here because he is an absolute expert in the field. And he and I
go very deep in terms of our work together, and then also several years. So it's been really fun. So Kevin, please, would you introduce yourself and just let them know a little bit more about you?
Sure. Well, I mean, I've served in ministry as a youth worker, worship leader for a while, and then I worked at a couple of different camps as director, and then eventually became a pastor and loved all three of those roles. And then I finally got my dream job, which was working for a church and a camp. Got to be the director there and was one of the pastors at this large church, which owned the camp and had a school with a lot of kids in it and the child care. And so it was a big ministry. Just thrilled to be part of that. After 3 years, our lead pastor left right before COVID, and then the elders put me in charge and temporarily until we find the new lead pastor. But that was doing 2 or 3 jobs was a bit much. And long story short, got burned out, ended up going to this place called Shepherd's Canyon Retreat for a week-long counseling retreat is what it is. And then that began the healing process. A couple of months later, my wife said, hey, here's this thing called Delight Your Marriage. Never heard of it before, but why not? There's 3 free classes. Why don't you go check it out? And so I did. And I'm like, hey, I have a master's degree in family life ministry. I've never seen anything this good before. And I mean, most of these things, most of the things, and I'm not criticizing the others, they're all good, but it's like, I mean, comparatively speaking, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole instead of taking out the bullet. And so Delight Your Marriage goes down deep and just pulls out the cause and helps the healing to begin. And so I said, Ton, we need to do this. And so I went, and of course, I did the men's program for 12 weeks, and that just continued the healing. Ended up working with you, Bella, and loved that. And then at some point, then Shepherd's Canyon Retreat said, hey, we'd love to have you here. And so I worked with them. I've been working with them for 1.5 years, and 4 months ago, they made me the executive director. And so that's kind of where I am today. Anyway, so that's kind of my story. So I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for either one of those ministries, but including Delight Your Marriage. So I'm thrilled to be able to help promote it any way I can.
Oh my goodness. I so appreciate that. And we miss you here. We still have, if you go on the website, ladies and gentlemen, Kevin's amazing work is still featured there. If you click on the videos, he's well missed. But I will say that it really is special to have you working with pastors, because Delight Your Marriage does work with so many leaders. Marriage, where do they find marriage support? Usually they're the ones that are supposed to give it in their congregation.
And if your audience isn't a pastor, they know a pastor who might need either one of these ministries. So that's why I'm here today, is to kind of help raise awareness. But also too, it's for more than just pastors, because we help all kinds of people, and worship leaders or teachers in ministry or whatever. Anyone who serves in a ministry role, not necessarily a support role. We've had people ask us, "Hey, can the church secretary come?" Well, not yet. We're not to that level yet, but anyway. So yeah.
Okay. So it's really like the top leadership. So tell me, we want to talk about this word that when you and I were discussing. Compassion fatigue. And I'm just curious if you can clarify what that means.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people may think that compassion is the same as empathy and sympathy, but there's some subtle differences. And I like to think about it in terms of head, heart, hands, and feet. So with your head, that's what sympathy is. It means that you can mentally understand what the person is feeling in their head. Okay. Then there's the heart. And that's where the empathy comes in. That means that you emotionally feel what the other person is feeling. So when they hurt, you hurt. You can kind of feel that and sense that. And then compassion is where you take those two and you and use your hands and feet. It's where you act in a way to help relieve the suffering of someone else. It combines those two and turns it into action. And in fact, the Latin roots of the word compassion, I don't mean to get technical here, but
I love
means
it. Keep going.
it means to suffer with someone. And that's
Oh,
exactly what I think that First Corinthians 12:25-26 talks about, the body of Christ and how the parts should have equal concern. And if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. And if one part's honored, every part rejoices with it. And so it's just that compassion that we're called to as the body of Christ, to have compassion for others. And so yeah, and some people end up getting full-time jobs where they have compassion for others, whether it's people in the medical field, counselors, pastors, or whatever. So yeah.
wow. So, um, yeah, I love that. I love this mindset of mind, heart, and hands. Like
Yeah.
where are each of these? So sympathy, empathy, compassion.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is really interesting because as somebody who full-time serves,
Yeah.
it's an absolute tendency that I think many leaders have to just go, 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 go. And that's all you're doing. And isn't that what Jesus calls us to, is just constant compassion, constant serving, constant doing? What would you
Sure.
say?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I mean, uh, God rested on the seventh day, and he's got this thing called the Sabbath rest. And so we need to find balance in life. And that's what I love so much about working for Delight Your Marriage, because you encourage and enforce that we take weekends off, don't work evenings. And so I love that. And that's what really was helpful to me. And I didn't fully answer your question before. I told you what compassion was, but I didn't say what compassion fatigue was. So if I could go back and finish
Please.
my
Yeah.
answer there, sorry. But compassion fatigue comes into play when you absorb too much trauma in a short amount of time. It's sort of a secondary trauma. Yeah, it's like if you're frequently feeling the pain of someone else and having that compassion for someone, you may experience compassion fatigue. And maybe you yourself aren't directly exposed to something traumatic, but when you hear someone else's traumatic story, yeah, you may feel empathy for them and experience some of their trauma in a secondhand way. And so compassion fatigue is physical or psychological and emotional. It's the impact of helping people who've experienced trauma. And it's different than burnout. Sometimes people would get those two confused, because burnout is really, it could be from physical or emotional exhaustion or both. And you may get burned out from your busy schedule or having a heavy workload or being in a toxic work environment or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily revolve around someone else's traumatic experiences. So that's kind of the difference, is that, and burnout can sometimes be resolved just by changing the nature of your work or whatever here. But compassion fatigue kind of goes a little deeper than that. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you're saying, anyone doing anything till their limits, like they're passing their limits of what they should be, how
Right.
they should be operating as a human, as a soul
Yeah.
within a body, um, they could get burnt out. But you're saying specifically compassion fatigue generally is somebody who is focusing on helping somebody through trauma, suffering with them, which is what we're called to do.
Right, right. And so that could be, I mean, because some people have, maybe they're a chronic caregiver for a parent or for a family member or something like that here, but also too, people that are in the healthcare industry, or counselors and therapists, teachers, first responders, pastors, or other ministry workers. They all have roles where they're constantly exposed to helping others, and with compassion. And so it can happen to people that don't do that full time, but it can also happen to people that are just caregivers in the home.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because it's deep emotional connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk more about this because, so what, before I talk too much, let me ask you, what do you recommend so somebody doesn't get into that space?
Sure, sure. Well, first, you should recognize some of the signs. And so I just made a list of 10 signs. There's more than this, but I didn't want to make this too long here. But, like, for example, if you have trouble sleeping, you have a hard time controlling your emotions, such as sadness or anger. For me, when I was in my burnout or compassion fatigue, 2 years is really how long I feel like I was in that. Yeah, I was angry at everyone and even angry at God. And, there was one time I made a mistake at leading worship, and between services, a few of the elders came to my office and they saw me in tears, and they realized that something was wrong. And so that's the thing, is that sometimes your emotions are kind of exaggerated, and so you have you know exaggerated emotions, and so because instead of having a clear mind, your extreme emotions cause a clouded or biased judgment, and you have trouble focusing. You have lots of ideas and plans, but you can't put them into action. And so then because of all that, you start to distance yourself from other people. You just prefer to be alone. Um, you're feeling sad and depressed, hopeless, helpless. And eventually you start believing that the world is unfair, and that even God is unfair, or that he just doesn't care. Or if he's even there. We had a guy one time that wrote to our ministry a couple months ago, and it was a pastor, and I don't remember what denomination he was in, but he wrote to us and said, "Hey, I'm just like a zombie. I'm just walking around. I'm not even sure I believe in God anymore." And I was fairly new, and I'm like, I don't know if I can help this guy here, but I turned it over to our lead therapist and let him handle it. And because he's been doing it for 14 years and knows how to deal with all this. So, but the guy ended up coming, and a week after, and they come for a whole week. And at the end of that week, he came into our staff and volunteer devotion time and just thanked us profusely and said, "Guys, this is the best week of my life. Thank you so much." And
Wow.
and his wife even called us a couple weeks later and volunteered to do some of the professional services that she does. She said, I'm just gonna do this for free. You guys need this. I'm here to help. Because this guy you sent back to me is different than the one that I sent away. And so I'm so grateful. So yeah, it just sounds just like what I heard all the time when I worked for Delight Your Marriage. Is people were always saying, "Hey, this is a changed man or a changed woman." So praise God.
Praise God. That is so good, Kevin.
Uh,
Um,
and just
yeah,
two
it's
more. Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and I didn't tell you the numbers. I'm actually on 9 and 10 now. But anyway, some people will medicate themselves with alcohol or drugs or porn or sleeping all day or whatever. And then the last thing is that they feel like giving up and just resigning from work because you just feel like you have nothing left to give. So that's recognizing the signs. I've got a few more thoughts, but go ahead, and you were going to ask me something. Go ahead before I go too far.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting to be thinking about, those symptoms. There really could be a lot of reasons for those symptoms. Some of those
Right.
symptoms, it's certainly a discernment process to figure out, is that symptom because of a underactive thyroid, or is it compassion fatigue? So I think
Yes.
it is a
Yes.
discernment process, but that's
Yeah.
why I'm so grateful that you're here to help us understand,
Yeah.
is that actually what we're dealing with? And what do you recommend for us to look at our life and say, here we are, uh, uh, um, I want to say exposed, but almost, vulnerable to the
Right.
potential of really being not only ineffective for God's kingdom, but actually harming those in God's kingdom. Because like you talked about, anger and despair and exaggerated emotions and feeling unfair and being disappointed with God. And I mean, those things seep out into our relationship. So here we are trying to serve God, and then we're actually harming the people that we're supposed to be, depending on the role, but maybe supposed to be shepherding, leading,
Yeah.
loving well. So yeah, curious what you would say is
Yeah.
what leaves us vulnerable to it.
Yeah. Well, so I think, yeah, I think part of it too is because we don't take care of ourselves. And so that's another thing of how to go back. Once you realize this is what's going on, you recognize these signs, and it's not just one or two, it's several of them. And actually, as I go back and look and think about my own um, my own burnout or, time of compassion fatigue, I look back and I realize, you know what, I had less than half of the fruits of the spirit. I mean, I wasn't very patient or kind. I was angry all the time. I had all these different things. And I was looking at it, it's like, well, this is like a test for me to look back. And I'm not saying that that's the scriptural reason for that verse, but sometimes we think of the 9 fruits of the spirit as like commands, but they're really results. It's like the fruit of the spirit. That's like the fruit of a tree is the fruit doesn't cause the tree to grow. Anyway, you get it. But yeah, so taking care of yourself by, well-balanced diet, exercise, sleep, socializing with others. I mean, it's kind of like the flight attendants will tell you to put the mask on yourself first and then put it on your child, whatever here. That's what it is you need to take care of yourself. And what one of our clients, our pastors that came here said that after going through a week, he said, you guys are like the tow truck that tows the tow trucks. As you think about traffic and, you have tow trucks that tow, like everyday cars, but who tows the tow trucks? And that's kind of what our ministry does here and stuff. So, but yeah, it's important for Sabbath rest, and which of course is a spiritual discipline where it's really more about trusting God to handle things. It's like, I think that was my problem years ago is I'm just like, hey, I think I can do all this here. You start to think that you're the one doing the work when it's really God working through you. But anyway, yeah. So
I
reducing.
want to just, excuse me. I just want to point out that exact moment. We've done Sabbaths for about somewhere around 10 years, maybe a little more, just as a family.
Right.
And it was hugely mind altering. Like you mentioned, it's really trusting God. It's instead of, oh my gosh, we have so much to do. I can't rest because there's just too much to do. Instead, it's saying it's an act of rebellion against the world's ways. And you're saying, no, God is in control.
Yeah.
And he has given me rest as a way to actually get fueled to serve others even better. Because if I'm not rested, I'm liable to hurting someone. It's just like coming to work without having slept the night before. If you're operating heavy machinery and you haven't slept the night before, I mean, that's danger. That is dangerous. Right. You have to sleep well. As you mentioned, you have to we really have to honor the temple that God has given us, because we don't do this work outside of the temple God has given us.
Yeah. Well,
so I love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. And I love, like working for you. I love that because you help us go through some really good things. And one of those books was Emotionally Healthy Discipleship by Pete Scazzaro. And, and in there, he says that one of the 4 failures that undermine deep discipleship is that we emphasize doing for God over being with God. And I think that happens a lot. I know that was, my challenge there, because I'm just wasn't really good at balancing between doing and being. And it's like with the Mary and Martha story, those of us that are addicted to doing have a hard time understanding that story. It's like, wait a minute, Martha's the one doing the right thing. What the heck does Mary getting all this praise for here? But, Mary is the one that had faith to believe that God is God. And, because, God appreciates our help, but truth be told, he really doesn't need our help as much as we think he does. It's like he's inviting us to be on this journey of faith and not really a journey of failure. And he wants us to trust in him more than we trust in our own abilities. Because how arrogant is it for me to believe that I worship a God who is so weak that he needs my help to get things done? It's just a crazy thought of it's like, no, I need his help.
That's right. Yeah. We when we really understand our tiny situation in the universe, it becomes very apparent that we can't do a whole lot on our own. When we really recognize that the God of the universe invites us, like he wants us to do his will. He has a will for us. He has even the works planned out for us before we were born, but we absolutely can't walk in them when we're relying on our own strength, when we're running on fumes. That's what I often feel in it's when I become ineffective at this work is because I am not spending enough time resting with Jesus,
Yeah.
abiding in him.
Yes.
And I really can easily get off track in I would say a little c compassion fatigue. But I
Oh,
think
yeah.
what you're talking about is kind of the big C
Right.
compassion fatigue, if you will, big
Yeah.
C, big F, where it's like, okay, this is really, you've gotten in a wrong um, lifestyle, a lifestyle that then proliferates difficulty, for a long time. And I'll say one other practice that's been super helpful for me in
Yeah.
this work
Yeah.
is not just Saturdays, but also Wednesdays are really
Sure.
intentional days of offline work. So sometimes my boys will get home on Wednesdays and they'll say something like, "Oh, today's your day off." And I'm like, "No, I was working. I just wasn't online," because
Yeah.
it's really when we work in terms of pursuing God, that's work. It's
Yeah.
work to pursue God and try to discern his will and, write and read and process and think and all this. And our rest days are the days that we're like kicking back, playing, having fun, board games, run around, be playful,
Yeah.
laugh, not have a schedule. But the times where I just need to pursue Jesus, that's a completely different realm of work.
Right.
And so, anyway, I actually consider those two very different
Yeah.
modes. Like, I would not consider Wednesdays a rest day. I would consider that my pursue Jesus more intentionally day. And then Saturday is like okay, let's just chill, relax, throw schedule to the wind and just
Yeah.
be filled by God's just kindness because he gives us kind things. He lets us enjoy. So I'm curious, I'm just riffing off of some of the things that you're saying, but tell me
Yeah.
what you consider as important um, to help people who might be in this space
Yeah.
of compassion fatigue. What would next steps be for
Sure.
them?
Well, I mean, another thing would be, I mean, obviously you want to reduce your workload if that helps to be, whatever, because, but also too, to not be ashamed to ask for help when you need it. Because I think sometimes too, people are like, I can do this on my own, or well, whether it's, counseling or marriage help or whatever it is, your people just kind of like think that they are automatically wired with this knowledge. And,
Right.
the older you get, the more you don't know, I guess. So, it's just, but just don't be ashamed to ask for help. Uh,
Yes. And I think that's so, so important. I love that you even said the word shame, because
yeah,
a lot of times, whether it's practical help of just how to's,
yeah,
how do I learn to have my life in a balance that makes the work I'm doing sustainable? I mean, I think that's a huge challenge for pastors because they're the go-to man. They're the one that should have quote unquote all the answers. So where is he going to go get answers for his own balance and his own clarity on what will actually feed him and allow him to gain uh, sustenance in the long term? Be able to have a lifestyle of compassion that supports a lifestyle that supports the compassion that he is meant to live out. So hopefully that leads us into some ideas around the ministry practically that you do
oh, sure.
now and that you run as well.
Yeah. So if you are in ministry, I'm speaking to the audience here, that if you or someone is in ministry, yeah. So like what we do, and I think that's what you're asking me is what we do at our ministry here is we have week-long counseling retreats, and our main ministry is located in Arizona, but we're also looking at expanding to other areas as well. But there's only maybe 5 at the most that I know of that do this around the country here. And what we do is now a lot of our kinds of ministry that sound the same, they are preventative, and ours is therapeutic. So if, for example, if you're like, I need help, I don't know what to do here, come see us. And there's a lot of reasons that people come see us, but it could be burnout. It could be that they're in conflict with other church members, or maybe they you know, they're just having trouble with all kinds of things here. Um, and so you come for a week, and there is you get at least 20 hours of counseling. Now, most of that is in group time. And we only limit it to 8 people at a time. So it's not like this big group that you're sharing, your life story with. You're sharing with a small group, 8 people. Sometimes it could be 4 couples, 8 individuals, or a combination. And then we have 2 therapists, a male and a female, and then a pastor is our chaplain. And so those 11 people will spend the week together, learning and growing and sharing. And yeah, so there's group time in the mornings, there's individual and couple times in the afternoons, and then there is a day off on towards like the middle, like Friday is the day off where they get to go to town and just kind of hang out and relax. Because after 3 days of counseling, then you're like, okay, this is intense, but it is a beautiful place. In the evenings, there's free time, and we have a pool and a hot tub and all kinds of stuff. And then, I have to test it out too to make sure it works.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Can't let that not be untested for the
Right.
general public. No, that's great. Well, and Kevin, I've seen pictures. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But really, I love the mindset of picking you up out of where you currently are.
Yeah.
Like certainly there would be value. Let's pretend that if this beautiful ministry could come to a church and counsel, and that would be good. But I think there's value of a pastor actually exiting the current environment that is causing so much difficulty, and actually giving him a fresh environment, and almost giving him an opportunity to step outside of the current situation and wrap his head around like, oh, that's true. I have been doing X, Y, and Z, and I have been going full tilt for however many years. And oh, I don't actually have a clear sense of what kind of lifestyle aspects do I need to put in place, and what things I could potentially delegate. As you talked about, getting help. Maybe there's even help practically of, I don't have to do all of those things that I think are on my to-do list that I absolutely have to do. Maybe I could delete some of those things that are on my to-do list, and they don't have to get done, or they don't have to get done perfectly, or somebody else would be happy to volunteer and do it. Actually, I remember that, Kevin. That was a big thing that you instigated when you were here with us, was volunteers. It was something I hadn't even thought of. And we were really early-ish in terms of, I hadn't even thought of it. But the truth of the matter is, the amount of people that we serve now, if we didn't have volunteers, that it wouldn't be sustainable. And it's just amazing how, some of those seeds that you don't even know you planted are like, oh, well, thank God for Kevin having those ideas. But it's true. I mean, there are so many ideas practically that it sounds like a ministry specifically focused on the therapy of, okay, I see you, Pastor. I see that you have loved well. We need to take care of you a little bit. We need to, just like Moses, Joshua, lift up your hands. Like, you're doing the hard work. This is not easy, taking care of God's people, shepherding, fighting off those wolves. I mean, that is not easy. So here, let's let you go in Arizona, beautiful palm trees, pool. I mean, it's seriously, the pictures are so gorgeous. But to actually take a step out and enjoy that time. And, you mentioned time with your couple. You mentioned time as couples, and I'm curious what that dynamic is. Having a spouse alongside the pastor aspect. How is that?
We highly recommend that husbands and wives come together. I mean, and it'll work when they come by themselves, but when they come together, even though maybe the wife has a job at somewhere else, at a doctor's office, but it helps because husbands and wives are there to support each other. And it's not just the pastor and a +1 or whatever, but it's really meaningful whether they come together or whatever here. And so in the afternoons, they'll have like a 1-hour session. And if it's, and it could be like the couple has a 1-hour session, or maybe individually, maybe they want to talk about things separately. Maybe the husband has some things he doesn't quite ready to share with his wife. And so they'll meet separately or whatever it is here. And in the morning, it's great because they all meet together. And it kind of reminds me of with Delight Your Marriage, how you have these groups of people and cohorts or whatever you want to call it here, but where you can kind of like you hear somebody else's problem and you're like, that's something that I need to do, or hey, I've got an idea how to help you. So you're helping each other while the therapist and the chaplain are all kind of facilitating time together. So yeah, love it, love it.
Oh, that's really neat. So do you find that people that come, is it long-term shifts, do you see?
So you mean after they leave and everything?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't always hear the afterwards. I mean, because for one thing, we're not their local therapist, so to speak. Here, as a matter of fact, the therapists that we bring in are from different states. They're all from out of state because Arizona has like a reciprocal law for 90 days. You can practice in Arizona for 90 days, and then so
that's cool.
People come from all over. They come from all over the United States, and we even have people from out of the country come from England and other places and stuff. And so it's hard for us to do any follow-up per se. But like for me, when I went through, it was right at about the time of COVID, and therapists were able to do telehealth issues where they could do across state lines. And so I was able to continue with my therapist that I met here at Shepherd's Canyon Retreat for another 7 months on a monthly basis, just to kind of continue. And he's actually the one that recommended me to the leadership, saying, "Hey, I think Kevin's ready to take over. He's got some good ideas." And his wife, they're both awesome. So anyway, I was really grateful. So all these things, and so it's just weird because it's like God was planning for this a long time ago. He just didn't tell me, and I wish I wouldn't have had to go through 2 years of challenging times to get here, but it all worked together for good. So.
Yeah, well, I wonder if you would have had the heart and the empathy truly to not just the sympathy, but also empathy to really understand what these pastors are going through.
Yeah.
Because that's painful, especially when a pastor has given his life quite literally for the purpose of spreading the gospel, and then the lifestyle a pastor believes the gospel requires doesn't seem to be sustainable based on human limitations.
Absolutely. And it's hard for pastors and other ministry workers to share, because you don't go up there and preach a sermon about your flaws. And so who do you talk to? Sometimes you can't go to other pastors because maybe that'll get you in trouble with your denominational leaders and get kicked out of ministry and lose a job. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why pastors are kind of isolated and alone, and they need somewhere to go, and or they just dump it all on their wife. Well, that's not the best way to handle it either. I mean, wives are there to support you, but they can't be your only support. And so, yeah, it's important.
Yeah, that's right. And, wives do take on a lot of, often, even if they have an outside job, they still take on a lot of responsibility in churches most of the time. That's my experience, at least. And they take on the husband that's been in such a difficult situation, who then comes home and is all of those 10 or more attributes that they discuss. So, Kevin, in terms of how this affects marriage, because obviously Delight Your Marriage, when you talked about going through this beautiful counseling, and tell me the name again, because I just forgot it.
Oh, Shepherd's Canyon Retreat? Is that what you're saying?
Shepherd's Canyon Retreat Ministry. Shepherd's Canyon Retreat Ministry. Say it 5 times fast. No, but it is, I want us to remember that. But when you were, I think you mentioned the timeline. So you went there. Yeah. And that was very helpful, kind of your steps in recovery. And then you mentioned that Delight Your Marriage had an important place and I'm just curious your journey, if you'd be willing to share that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, is that my wife and I didn't have a bad marriage. And of course, as you find out when you go through Delight Your Marriage, you're like, oh, I thought I had a great marriage, and now I have an even better marriage. And so you're the 8 to 10 or the 1 to 10 scale is it just gets totally out of whack because you thought you were a 7 or 8, and you realize that now you're even better. And so anyway, so yeah, so went through that, and really what it did is see, because I was just in a place where I didn't have time to do Delight Your Marriage, and I know that's a really important thing, is to have time to go through all the modules and everything like that here. I just didn't have time, but I was just like, this is really rejuvenating me, and then just having a better marriage was amazing, because that just helped support me, because at that time I was just like, I don't know, I was just lost. And so um and really you know I, well, let me just talk about marriage in general first here, because like, some people that are listening, you might have because like compassion fatigue. Well, it's like, I'm not a pastor or whatever here. What does it have to do with marriage? Why are you doing this on this podcast here? But maybe you're someone who has a spouse who has some kind of emotional or physical or mental challenges. And perhaps because of something that happened to him or her after you got married, and you're becoming worn out from caring for him or her. There's challenges that people find themselves in marriage. And it's like, they feel like it's this burden. And you care for your spouse a lot, and you're caring for them and caring for them. And at least for guys, sometimes it's just like, sometimes you end up blaming the problems in marriage on your spouse. And and then you get into this thing called self-pity, which I know you've talked about in a previous podcast, which is one of my favorites. And but how self-pity is a form of pride. And I know many men, including myself, who went through your program in a state of self-pity. It's like, wah, I've got problems and it's all her fault. I don't know why I'm here. But because of compassion fatigue, they didn't realize that pride is what was messing up the relationship. And, but it's our job as husbands to lead our wives. Ephesians 5 says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, that's telling me I should be the boss and she should do whatever I say. Well, no, it means that at least what I believe is that we're called to lead our wives in love, and love our wives unconditionally. We need to be the leader and love her, as it says in Ephesians 5. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We love because he first loved us. And so, Christ loved us first. And so we respond to his love by loving him and serving him and his people. And sometimes us men, we act like we're the victims, okay? But we should live like victors, because Christ has made us the champions. We're not to live like dictators, but as Christ, who gave his life for the church. And instead of reacting to our wife, complaining about her, we should be men and love her the way she receives love. And and then she'll just respond in love. And instead of reacting, we need to be proactive in loving our wives. So that is kind of what I learned. And that, I'm sorry, I kind of went on a little rabbit trail here for a minute, but I just wanted to bring that in because, so that was a really important piece. And so it was just like, I was able to receive more than I was giving, because I went through the steps in the order that you teach in the program and everything here. And so it's so important, because if you get them out of order, it kind of messes things up, which I'm sure I've been doing for years. But getting back to your question, or did you want to respond to that before I jump back to your original question? Okay.
No, I think it's beautifully said, and I think that's exactly right. It's about leadership, and when we think that means that we get to be served, then we have to look at the person of Jesus and wonder, well, he was on his hands and knees washing his disciples' feet, and he was the God of the universe. Right. And so there's an aspect of maybe leadership looks a little different, and it actually can allow us to love our spouse well. And then, as you mentioned, our spouse then is freed up to love us well. So I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, to finish the rest of your question here, after Delight Your Marriage, then, well, see, that's the thing, is that, when the church elders realized that I was completely burned out, they gave me a couple of weeks off, and I took a couple of weeks vacation. I took the whole month of December off, because I thought, I just need a break, and did some things I'd never done before. I was actually in a musical, and that was fun to do that for. I've never, well, I did it maybe when I was in high school or
That's
something,
awesome.
but so
Mhm.
yeah, so then I started working, for Delight Your Marriage. And can't work weekends or evenings, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, boy, you know what? Right now, that sounds really, really good. And then I think it was about 6 months after that Shepherd's Canyon said, "Hey, we want you to do this," and I'm just so blessed to be here. And I wouldn't be here if it wouldn't been for all the things that God led me through, including Delight Your Marriage. So yeah,
That's amazing. And did you tell me your wife is also on the team?
she is. She's our yes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't leave her out. She's the executive coordinator. So I'm the executive director. She's executive coordinator. She has a way better memory than I do. She can remember people and connections. She loves genealogy. She'll just know all these people and how they're related and who used to do this and that. And I'm just lucky to remember somebody's first name. So
That's not true, by the way. I happen to know he's got a great memory, but I will say I love that because that's actually very difficult, I think, to work with your spouse and to work with your spouse well. And the fact that it happens and it happens well is pretty
yeah,
amazing, and also is a testament to your marriage. And so that's
yeah.
really powerful, really beautiful.
Well, and if you want to test out your marriage, spend 2 months and 12,000 miles on the road traveling from Arizona to Montana to Florida, back to Kansas and Nebraska and Illinois, back to Texas, and then over to Arizona. Try that out. And if it wouldn't have been for our marriage being so good, we just loved it. We could spend hours in the car just talking and not running out of things to say. And so
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome.
So,
I'm so happy to hear that.
yep.
Well, Kevin, this has just been a joy and so many good insights. And really, we're here to help the body of Christ. We're here to give them great marriages, give them a really compassion. What would be the opposite of compassion fatigue? A fueled life and heart in
Sure.
order to sustain long-term compassion. But truly, I mean, it's just so vital. It's just so vital for men and women to continue the work that God wants them to be
Yeah.
about. So where do they find you in order to find more information? What would you say?
Yeah. shepherdscanyonretreat.org. If you know how to spell shepherd, you should be able to find us because that's the one word that people misspell. But Shepherd's Canyon Retreat. If you want to email me directly, just send it to kevin@shepherdscanyonretreat.org. But yeah, so we're here. We're ready to help anyone that needs help. So
Yeah, no, this is just wonderful. And I really hope that the listener, actually, let me ask you, do you have
yeah.
any final thoughts for a listener who may be feeling some of the symptoms that you have described?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're if you're in ministry, then you could definitely give us a call. I mean, for everyone, contact, find out who is a good Christian counselor in your area and so forth here. But um, with Shepherd's Canyon Retreat, it's sort of like we can get a lot done. Some people say we get like 3 or 4 months worth of counseling done in 1 week. And so, because sometimes people are like ready to quit their job, and I mean that's where I was at. I was ready to quit my job and just go be a Walmart greeter because at least I knew how to greet people at the door, just like a pastor does. But so
Oh my. Yeah. No, that's so good. That's so good. I mean, I think the most hopeful thing probably of your whole story is really that there is hope for a
yeah,
pastor that is,
absolutely.
you know, feeling burnt out, compassion fatigue. I mean, just exhausted.
Yep, for sure.
There is hope and there is help. So
Yep, yep,
I love that. Okay, Kevin. Well, thank you so much.
yep.
And I really appreciate the opportunity to chat. All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. This was awesome. Just to really recognize that what you do outside of your ministry really, really impacts how effective you can be and how long-term your efforts and your ministry can actually be. That it's sustainable. Obviously, we have seen ministries crash and burn so many times over. And it's really often all starting from a life outside of ministry that is not well balanced, that is not understood, just the complexities of the human psyche and how God made us spiritually, also emotionally and physically. And so, as you know, we love serving people in their marriages, in their intimacy specifically. But I'm hoping that this is a resource specifically for you pastors to know that there is a place to kind of get outside of your normal, to dig in and see how you can be having a life that will sustain the work God has called you to do. So you're always welcome. We'd love to serve you. delightyourmarriage.com/cc. Otherwise, please check out Kevin's resources. We'd love to serve you. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.